Hi and welcome back to the channel. This is our third video on taking an inexpensive guitar and making it great. In this video we're covering the locking nut adjustment, intonation on the strings, and getting the proper radius set on a Floyd Rose style bridge, which means we'll have to remove the saddles and add some shims. I'm going to add a few video clips showing me taking the tape off the guitar neck. In the previous video we kind of stopped and the last shot was just me showing you the polished frets. We've already done the cleanup and we're ready to move on, so stay tuned. Make sure you tape off your frets properly. It still took me 15 minutes to go through because of these ball ends and get the compound right there that worked in the tape. And there was just a little bit of compound between the fretboard and the fret. On darker rosewood, stuff like that, you can kind of get away with cheating a little bit. But on a clear maple neck like this, it shows everything. So take your time, get it good and clean. In this video, we're going to go through fixing this lock nut. In the first video, I showed that when the guitar is intonated, which we have our E there, we're going to go to our 12th fret. Just like in the first video, it's just barely falling off. Now if I push kind of hard, I can fix that. That's not an issue. The issue is the height here. As soon as you go and try to play your F, you can see that it's very high. And I'm going to try to decrease the pressure because someone's, oh, you're pushing too hard. And I am just to the point where it's not really making the note. And someone's probably going to comment that the guitar should be in your lap, and you're correct, but for video purposes it's much easier to have the guitar laying flat. And you can see that our B here is just starting to get in range, and we're a little past halfway down the scale before it's coming around. And there's our first note. Really, it's the C that is good. So we have two options. When we've removed this, we can remove material off the neck, or we can remove material off this locking nut. They do make shims if it's too low, and In our case, it's too high, so we need to machine some off. I've done a lot of these. I've done it both ways. I feel more comfortable in a scenario like this, that in the future, taking it off of this is easier. For one reason, if they decide to go up, this is a 42-9 is the stock string. If they decide to go to let's say 11-52 or something, we need to raise this to make those new strings work. It's pretty easy to put a shim underneath here, and you don't have to worry about getting this wood surface out of plane. So I find it easier to remove the material off the nut. Now we also need to check the high E. We need to get an idea of, do we need to take more material off of this side than this side, or even? So that's what we're going to do right now. See, that's pretty stable. I will give this company one thing. This particular guitar was sent to me intonated quite well. Now we're going to go and play our F. See, that's quite stable there. With that in mind, I am going to try to remove very, very little material off this side, and I'm going to concentrate on this side of the nut. I'm going to change the camera angle. We'll take a picture of it on the belt sander. And the next thing, I hear people say that sometimes the screws on these guitars strip. Some people call it Chinesium. That could be true, but China and Japan both have a different type of Phillips screwdriver that we do not have here in the United States. You can get it. It's called a JIS. It's Japanese Industry Standard. And believe it or not, the cross and the distance in the chamfer is different. A lot of the motorcycle guys run into this problem with the Hondas in the 70s and early 80s, saying the screws were cheap, and in reality they just had the wrong screwdriver. This particular screwdriver is a JIS, so we're gonna take these screws out and we'll go over to the belt sander and start working on this repair. We're just going to loosen these, because right now we still have string tension. We're going to take them out evenly. With string tension, you don't really have to worry about it moving anywhere, because as we make adjustments, we're not putting these screws back in. The string tension will keep the piece of metal in place. So here's a close-up view of the screw. Okay, now we're going to take some string pressure off, remove this piece, and remember, we're only going to remove material from this side. We will end up taking a little off of here, but we're going to concentrate on the low E side. Okay, we have the lock nut off the guitar. It's on our belt sander. If you notice, I have put a little note on it. LE, low E. That way I do not get confused on which side that I'm working on. Also have some water. This will get hot. Now you can cheat. Put 2 screws on it. This will actually help you hold on to the piece as you're working with it. Okay. Remember, this side looked pretty good. We need to remove material off of this side. You don't want to have the piece sitting like this. You want to sand even, keep the same amount of pressure across. In this case, we want to apply more pressure to this end, but not on an angle like that or like that. We want to keep pressure like that down to machine this one side. Some of these you can see right here, these little marks. Sometimes there'll be etching marks in here, and you can use those etching marks to see how much material you're cutting off. This one doesn't seem to have any. Alright, it's probably going to get quite loud. I'm going to turn on the machine. It's our first pass. There's something else that you can do so you have an idea of what you're actually doing. Let's grab a Sharpie. So you can kind of see where you're removing the material. Make sure that you're doing it evenly. Try one more time. Make sure that we have our right side. Low E on this way. Now the belt is going that direction. Everyone's a little different. I find if I stand in the direction that the belt's going, I'm behind it, it's a little more stable than standing over there trying to push into the material. Let's turn it back on. You can see what we have there. We still have our marks down here. It did remove a little material, and we've completely removed the marks up here. So we're going to put this back on the guitar and try it. This is just trial and error. You keep working on it until you get that first fretted note correct. Okay, we're back. This piece is cooled off. We're going to remove our two screws that was helping us hold on to the nut. This is our low E side. There's our mark. So kind of come in like that. Get it in. Come over. Get your strings back in the right spot. And we are going to retune the instrument. Okay, let's see how much of a change it made. We're just gonna, doesn't have to be perfect, we're just gonna make sure we're semi in the center there. Go to our E. Give it a bend. That's our 12th fret E, our open E. Let's check our F. You can see that it is still high. Let's go down, look at our high E. Now, the next thing we need to do is make sure we're not going to cut too much out. We're going to look at our playroom here. Make sure there's no buzzing. We definitely have some room. Before we continue to cut, we want to kind of look at how the string is setting in the nut. Let's remove a little bit more material. And again, we want to mark our piece. This is our high E side. And our low E side. And this is just to make sure we're taking a congruent amount of material. Don't forget your part orientation. That's why we marked this side. Let's put our 2 screws in. That's really just to help you hold it. If you've got really strong fingers, you probably don't have to do this. And yes, it gets hot quick. Alright, you can tell by our pieces here, we still have a little black showing up here. And we have completely removed it off the low E side. So let's go back over to the guitar and see if this is enough. Okay, this is our second attempt. That was our second pass on the belt sander. Take our screws out, dry it off a little bit. And then again, we have to go up on our tune. So I'll go into squirrel mode, get this guitar back up into tune, and we'll check it. Okay, let's see what we have on our low E. Give it a final tune here. Give it a stretch. That's pretty stable. Check our high E. Now let's check the culprit. We're getting much better. Before I take any more material off, I believe that we need to make an adjustment to the bridge. Okay, that's falling off just a little bit. Our E is stable. Our F is pretty good. Just a fraction high. Keep in mind, this is a Peterson strobe tuner. It's extremely accurate. So there's our low E. And there's our F. Don't want to remove any more material here until we know for certain our bridge is right. And I've already checked that a little bit, so I know some of the strings, it's going to need some saddle shims. So let's move the camera and we'll go up and look at the bridge and see what adjustments we're going to make back there. Okay, here we are at our cheap fluid rose copy. What we're going to look at now is the radius on these strings. If you look, it doesn't appear to have any saddles that have shims. Sometimes it's hard to tell. This one may have a shim under it, and this one may. But I found it pretty easy. If you just take your tool, put it directly on the top. We know this is a 12-inch radius, and we're going to see if any of the strings ring out. Our B is ringing out. Our G is ringing out. Now the D did ring out, but I hear a slight buzz. And I hear a slight buzz on the A. So once we get in here and loosen these to put the shims in, well, guess what? Now you're gonna have to start getting into re-intonating the guitar. But I believe to get this correct, we are gonna have to add some shims. So let's detune the instrument and take these screws out and see if there's some actual shims in there. Okay, here we are at the bridge, and I'd like to look at where the screw is in relation to the saddle. You can see the screw is back on the saddle. Now this guitar, the intonation was pretty good on. The reason I like looking at this is if you look at the shim, this is a stock shim. If you look at the distance between the hole and the end, now look at this shim. I have sanded this shim down for this saddle because I know the intonation's pretty close, so I can go ahead and modify the shim to where it's not going to stick out underneath, you know, the saddle. No one wants to see that big shim sticking out You know, they got a new guitar, they got a Floyd Rose original. No one wants to see that chunk of metal sticking out underneath their saddle. So this one right here, we know we have to move. So we're going to put one shim in this one. Now before you go too far, you can cheat. We know the intonation is pretty good. So I'm going to take a piece of tape and I'm going to fold the back side. And we're going to do saddle by saddle. We're going to take that flat edge piece of that tape. We're going to put it just about where the edge of that saddle is. And that gives us a reference of where we need to be. Now that's not on there really well, it's just because you folded the back of the tape, but it's good enough to where we can get it close. Let's take our screw out. Now that one, the screw was towards the back, so we can definitely just lift the saddle, put the piece in, bring our saddle back, and grab my pick tool. You gotta align the shim hole, the hole in the shim to the saddle to the hole in the bridge. And then we're also going to align the saddle to our piece of tape that we put right there. Doesn't have to be perfect, we're just trying to get the radius correct. We can always go back and reset our intonation. That's it. It's just barely snug, it's not over tightened. I'm going to go through in squirrel mode and put shims in this one, and this one. Alrighty, we're back. So we ended up putting a shim here, 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 and here. So I'm going to go back into squirrel mode because we definitely have to retune the guitar to get some tension on the springs, and then we'll check it with the radius gauge. Okay, I took the radius gauge one more time because remember we have shims here. I want to see just as light as possible what are ringing out, what notes. Okay, we have our strings loosened for the second time. Now, if you thought it was hard to get the first shim in, when you got two shims that you have to line the hole up, plus line it to the tremolo and get the screw through, sometimes that can get a little tricky. We're going to get a new piece of tape, and again we're going to fold the back over and just leave the sticky part on the one end. Like I said, we're going to have to re-intonate the guitar at this point anyway. We're just trying to keep it somewhat close. I don't know if you can see that in there, but the first shim is pushed back. So what we're going to do is we're just going to push that forward and grab the top shim. We're going to get them to align just like that. Now they're aligned. We're going to get it in the hole, line up, and push our saddle back down. And slide it back to get our screw in. Then align to our piece of tape. And it shifted on me. Doesn't take much. If one of those shims just get barely out of whack, the screw will not go in. Okay, back to squirrel mode. Okay, we're back. We've made our adjustment on our bridge. We have our radius as close as we can get it with our shims and our gauge, and we've adjusted the springs to get the tremolo to set even to the body. Now that we have that done, what we need to do is check our string height. If you're doing this for a customer, you should ask them, you know, what do they like? Everyone's a little different. So right now, to the bottom E, we're probably at 0.045, because I cannot see the 0.050, but I do see the whole line of the 0.040. That's quite low. Let's check our high E. And that's coming in at 0.040. Let's check it on our 12th. Let's move this over so you can get a little bit better view of it. Yeah, that E I'm going to call 0.047. pretty close. The high E we're going to call 0.040. That's a pretty low. That's pretty low. So let's look at our tuner here and see what ends up happening. Have we made positive changes in that E as far as when we fret that F? I'm going to put the guitar on my lap and check it so you can just look at the tuner. Let's get our E in tune again. There, our E is in tune. There's our F. There's our open E. There's our F. Let's go down to our 12th. And there's our E on the 12th. That's pretty good. I mean, if you want it perfect, you could probably, and a lot of this is how much pressure you're putting on the strings. That's why you want to keep checking back and forth, back and forth. Our E is high. And this is an extremely precise tuner. There we have our E stabilized again. Let's check our F. Let's refret it. Check our E on the 12th. Refret it. I think I was a little back on the fret. Yep. That'll also make a difference. Watch, if you're doing work for a client, watch them play. If they've got a habit of pressing the note back here, it makes a change depending on where you're depressing. A lot of guitar players play right up to the fret, and that does make a difference. And I'll show you. We're going to put dead center. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing. We're going to move my finger up on the fret. And again, back on the fret. And again, up on the fret. So you're gonna get a change. See, now it's falling off. And if they fret forward, it's going to be sharp. Okay. I can already tell there is a night and day difference in this guitar. The fret work, it's just like glass. If you go back and watch the very first video, one of my complaints was it felt gritty. All that has gone away. Now what I need to do is actually learn how to play guitar. So let's check our frets. There's an ever so slight buzz. That's not the time to panic. Remember, we made this neck perfectly straight to do the fretwork. Now is the time to check the relief in the neck. Now that you know your bridge is right, you've got this very close, so now let's check our relief. Okay, we're back. Changed the camera angle, and we're looking at the little bit of fret buzz that we have on our E. If you remember, we did make an adjustment to the nut. We lowered this nut to get this F in tune. So anything we put underneath here is going to affect that in relationship to the bridge. Our F is very close. We could take a saddle shim and put just underneath this side to increase that. If your client wants a perfectly straight neck, there are guitarists that want their neck to be perfectly straight. And our neck is perfectly straight. What we're going to do, I have found that in my guitar playing, I like a little relief in the neck. So we're just going to put just a little bit of relief in the neck. Doesn't take much. I would say view this cam like you would a geometry. If this is 90 degrees, when I put it in, it was probably at about 10 degrees, you know, to this side of 90. So we're about 5 degrees on this side of 90 now. So we've probably went 15 degrees, maybe 20 degrees max. And let's check our relief. I used to say, oh, it's X amount of turns, but here lately I've noticed that I've had some guitars that you just barely turn and you get quite a bit of relief without even really trying. Let's see what we have in the center, and that did put just a little bit, maybe 0.03 in the center. So we're going to give it a little bit more of a turn. And somebody's going to probably cringe again, but we're going to flex the neck. Just like you would stretching strings. I'm going to pull our bar out. We are going to check it again. Let me move the string out of the way so I can see. And I'm going to say that that's probably 0.4 millimeter maybe 0.3 again. It's still not a lot of relief. It's just barely got relief. So again, I'm at about 10 degrees off of 90, straight up and down here. The string is kind of holding it. There's our piece, and we're going to swing it about the same amount of distance on the opposite side of 90. Right in there. Give the string give the neck a flex. And that seems to have done it. I'm going to say that's 0.5. All right. Let's check the fretting. Sounds clear. Keep bumping the camera. And again, you should do this on your lap, but for demonstration purposes, we're doing it on the bench. That seems to have resolved the issue. I don't know if y'all were paying attention, but we did have a note down here that had a little bit of a buzz. So we're going to go back and check that. And that seems to have disappeared as well. So now we're going to check our tune one more time. Yep, it helps to plug the guitar in. Everything you do to your guitar makes a change. So if you have a guitar that's set up a half step down, you need to tune that guitar for that tuning. It does make a difference. And again, we're going to change the camera angle. We're going to set the guitar on my lap and give it a couple strums. And once we're satisfied with it, we'll put the screws back in the lock nut and re-engage the nuts. Okay, here we have the guitar. And remember, this isn't attached yet. I think what we need to do is just ever so slightly raise the bridge. And keep in mind, we've really haven't intonated the guitar. We are just getting the radius correct and getting either end of the nut correct. Once we set the intonation, if we come through and we find out these notes are really bad, we'll have to go in here with a file and file the grooves. And I previously checked the guitar. It seemed consistent from what it was doing across the nut. So we shouldn't have to do that. Now, you've made an adjustment to the truss rod. We've adjusted the locking nut. We've adjusted the radius. We've leveled all the frets, recrowned them, and polished them. But since we made these adjustments, our previous adjustment on our bridge, now the bridge is setting down in the back. So let's get that fixed, because it will make a difference. I don't know if I can do this and catch it on the video. If you look right here, the strings will elevate as the bridge moves. And that's due to the fulcrum position that Floyd Rose has. The further back the saddle is from the fulcrum, the more it's going to want to do that. So let's make that adjustment and see if that clears up before we raise the bridge. Okay, we've made our adjustments. Now our bridge is parallel to our body. Let's give it a couple notes here and that's pretty good. Now let's go through and just double check the intonations, because something sounds a little off to me. So we need to fine tune. Remember, we only put the tape in here when we adjusted these. So now we need to go back, get the intonation set right, and we'll take it from there. Okay, we're back. What we've done so far is we've adjusted our locking nut by sanding it to get our first fretted notes correct. We have added shims under the saddles that needed it to get this radius correct. This is a 12-inch radius. We've got it really close. I do believe that we need to make an adjustment to the height of the bridge. The action is extremely low, so we're going to set it at a good average action height. And anytime you raise that bridge, that's going to change the intonation. So it really makes no sense to intonate the guitar and then, you know, adjust the height of the bridge. So in the next video, we're going to go over how to properly raise the action on a Floyd Rose and set the intonation. And if you would, please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, and leave some comments. It helps YouTube's AI system push the video out so more people can see it. Thank you very much.